But the other thing that you've been dealing with in DC, well, you're dealing with all things all the time, as the Swamp newsletter makes clear, is the most recent developments at the Pentagon with Pete Hegseth saying he's going to restrict access to journalists and that everybody needs to sign new rules, which sounds like a Dua Lipa song, doesn't it? Maybe that's where he got it from. But in fact, what he managed to provoke was an unlikely allyship among the press who, for once, stood together and said they weren't prepared to do it. Can you fill us in on exactly what's going on there? And what is he actually trying to achieve?
Well, he's trying to achieve a situation where he doesn't get criticised for anything, and he keeps total control. He's the youngest Secretary of War, depending on whether it's war or defence, depending on your belief. Certainly in terms of the Trump administration, the Secretary of War. He lost control very early. I mean, he's basically come down on his own staff for claiming that they're leaking information from the Pentagon, when in fact the only one that's actually leaks anything of any significance is himself, with the whole signal
of course it is.
Debacle, when he included the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic on his own signal chat. And
this was when he was leaking classified war plans.
Yeah, so basically he was talking about a classified military strike on Yemen, and that was basically he then spread that information to his own group. So that's one kind of slightly ridiculous element of this whole thing. The other bizarre element is that he has a boss who is basically the audience he's operating to, Donald Trump, who won't stop talking. He's inviting the press in. The press conferences every day are widespread. I mean, he's talking about every subject under the sun. With Mr. Hegseth, he's had 2 actual briefings. He stopped all the background briefings, which basically give journalists a good idea of what's going on in the department and what's going on in certain situations, so they can have the perspective and the context to get things right. He stopped all those. He now won't allow anybody, any journalists, into his department without being escorted. And this latest thing is where he said that any information they publicise must be authorised by himself or his department. And this is the kind of the divining rod that's caused this rebellion amongst the press.
So, Sarah, tell us a bit about the rebellion among the press, because this seems fairly unprecedented, isn't it?
Well, we've never had an instance where the entire press corps at the Pentagon has been asked to sign a document saying they won't release any information without prior approval from the Pentagon. I mean, that goes against what reporting is. And so we've had multiple administrations for decades where this has not been something, but they offered up this 21-page set of rules that they must abide by. But it really has united every part of the media across the landscape. I mean, we've got all the way to Newsmax saying they won't sign on to this, along with Fox News not signing on to it, the president's favorite channel to watch. And of course, as you talk about the mainstream media or the legacy media with NBC and ABC and CBS. So this has united almost everyone together, and this is not what journalism is, it's not what journalism does, and it's not what the First Amendment is about, which protects the freedom of the press. And so that has been uniting pushback on this administration that I think maybe was ended up with more unity than they had expected. And it goes to show where they are with this, because just on Monday or this week, I forget what day of the week we are in, on Tuesday, the president was seated right down from the secretary, and Hegseth was asked about this by reporters at the White House, and he point blank lied about what this whole thing was about right next to the president. He said they're just not allowing them to go into restricted areas. He said reporters were able to roam free without badges, basically, and that's just never been the case. So he's going off of a set of lies, just sitting next to the president, and then the president hears this and he's like, well, yeah, maybe not going into classified places. not something that was happening before. And then the president started riffing on how maybe we'll kick the press out of the White House too and put them across the street, which he could do, I guess, but also I think that would receive similar pushback and unity from the news organizations. And also, I can't imagine the president long term going without speaking to the media. So that would be another challenge for that.
So it seems that Pete Hegseth has had somewhat of a catastrophic first few months. He leaks classified war plans, then pretends they weren't classified. And then he summons all the generals 10 days ago from across the world, creating a security issue, and then tells them that he's going to start firing fat generals, which I think he's done. Now he's trying to ban journalists from the Pentagon unless they sign something saying that they will show the Pentagon exactly what they're going to say. Is he going to fire fat journalists? I'm wondering if we even have the right weight and height ratio to be having this conversation without Pete. But what I'm really asking is this for the audience of one for Donald Trump, that Donald Trump knows that Hegseth hasn't actually been great? His birthday parade was pretty unimpressive compared to what the Chinese promptly put on and what the Brits put on when he went to Windsor Castle. So do we think that Hegseth is in last chance saloon here and he's frantically paddling under the surface and trying to show his boss that he's capable of, well, I don't really know what this is supposed to symbolize that he's capable of.
Absolutely. We were told early on that Trump did not want a repeat of his first administration, where it was kind of chaos. He was firing people, hiring people. It was a lot of unrest within the administration. We were told he was going to give his cabinet, most of his leading cabinet members, a year. So there wasn't this kind of constant departure thing. So my guess is watch out for January and Pete Hegseth, because I don't think he's going to last much longer than that first year.
I would say that was also part of the strategy, though, because if you say your cabinet members are not going to be long-term choices from the get-go, then you put them in this competition from the get-go to basically fight it out and prove who's the most loyal to the president. And that has been something that the president has valued above all else, above how they handled the job, how they handled the policy. It is how they basically support him. And so Hegseth has maybe been underwater this entire time as a defense secretary, having little to no experience compared to other previous defense secretaries. But he's underwater in the job, but he's not underwater in the same sense when it comes to his fight for the president. And you see them all start with heaping praise on this president in every meeting. I mean, even when he was talking about the press requirements, he started by hitting the press over coverage of the Gaza agreement, and then went on to talk about make up stories about why they actually needed these restrictions. And so it's really a fight for the president's attention and support more than it is a fight for the job and the department.
So he's bottom of the list in terms of efficiency and top of the list in terms of suck-ups.
Was it significant that Pete Hegseth wasn't on the Middle East tour?
I mean, certainly, yeah. I mean, he's taken very much a back step to the whole procedure, hasn't he? I mean, Marco Rubio, who sits the other side of Trump at the cabinet meetings, he was all these things, and he's taking a more of a central role, and Hegseth is stepping back. I mean, certainly the case. I don't think he's trusting him. I seem to remember the last meeting in the Middle East, he was put on a separate plane from the others, Hegseth. Again, sending a message perhaps.
Well, perhaps he had his own gym on that plane, because the one thing he does seem to enjoy doing is working out. And that may be as a sort of as someone who's wrestled with alcohol, that it's a way of channeling his energy and his anxiety. But as we know, he's fired people who are around him because he didn't trust him. The reports coming out of the Pentagon are that he is anxious, that he's nervous, that he's panicked, which is why he's enforced some of these new rules on the press. Other than being in good shape, which he appears to be. In fact, I'm somewhat puzzled, and actually Donald Trump himself picked up on this. With his arms, he seems unable to close his arms next to his body. They're so jacked, his arms, that they sort of stick out a bit like a penguin. Anyway, what do we think that Donald Trump actually thinks of him? And then I was going to ask you, we know that Fox is part of this media alliance that has decided not to sign his rules. He was famously a co-host on a weekend chat show at Fox. And we also know he's slightly gone after Fox's Pentagon correspondent. I think it's Jennifer Griffin, who he's reamed out in previous press conferences. And yet we know that Trump loves Fox News. So can you square the circle for me here?
I think the president, in some ways, picks the people he picks for positions based on their looks. I mean, Caroline Leavitt, for one, whatever you think of her in terms of how she's been handling the job, he always talks about her lips and her face when she's speaking to the media. He talks about central casting. He talked about the generals being out of central casting. I'm like, they're also decades of experience, a century or more of experience among these men who gathered in Virginia recently. But he talks about things in terms of casting. And Pete Hegseth, for a moment, was central casting in his mind in terms of a look. Whether he had the criteria and the qualifications for the job, that was extremely questionable from the get-go, and many people in this world who know the Pentagon and know the military, know the Defense Department, said absolutely not. He has none of the qualifications. He has none of the prior experience to lead this. And so the president went with this person, then based because he was on Fox News, it would seem, and was a close ally and supporter. But now he has to actually do the job. And I think that is where he's fighting so much for his life, is there have been so many embarrassing headlines for him that Trump may be someone who likes the loyalty, but he also doesn't like embarrassing headlines. And that could be something that'll come back to be the biggest problem for Pete Hegseth. But when it comes to Fox News, it is interesting because it feels like you're watching two different things. One, they have Jennifer Griffin, who's a fantastic Pentagon reporter, and she has been on Fox News for a long time and has been accurately reporting on the Trump administration and been critical where due of the Trump administration. And then you have her former colleague, Pete Hegseth, who has taken it out on her on numerous occasions. I called her out in at least one press briefing to her face. But she has fought back and was able to stand her ground because she is such a smart, capable, educated reporter that she has actually made him back off in front of the cameras himself. And so I think there's a divide at Fox News on when you see her versus where you see him. And I noticed that you haven't really seen the president attacking Jennifer Griffin's reporting in his tweets, which he has other Pentagon reporters. But I'm not sure if there's anything there, or if he just hasn't seen her reporting the same way he has seen Fox and Friends and other shows, and when he's actually watching the news.